Hi, and welcome to the End Times Bible Study. Great to have you along. It is my hope and prayer, first of all, that God is glorified, that we are turning our eyes to Him, that He is our ark. As Noah and his family went into a wooden boat for sanctuary and safety during the most terrible time the planet had ever seen, so you and I will enter the ark of Jesus Christ before it's too late, before the door is shut and the rain begins to fall. May we find refuge and sanctuary in Jesus Christ. It does us no good to lift up this person or that person, to make something of any human. No human can save us. Only the power of God can save us. And if we're depending on the power of God, then certainly He deserves glory and honor and respect. So it is my heart's desire that we all together as one, not esteeming one another as anything, but esteeming God in all ways, in all things, and that we together as children would come and submit ourselves and be small before the Lord and receive from His hand whatever it is that He chooses to give to us. I want to start off tonight by sharing a bit of an encouraging prayer update. About a month ago, I'd read a post on Facebook about Planned Parenthood, and I really, really hate the deeds of Planned Parenthood, the same as the Lord hated or hates the deeds of the Nicolaitans. Wickedness, abomination. They murder unborn children. They destroy young women's lives, all for the sake of profit. And they've generated tremendous propaganda. And they've sold it in schools in the form of sex education and everything else. They go to their target market, which is in the school system, with sex education, and they know full well, it's been admitted, that the more sex education you get at the younger age, the more sexually promiscuous the children become. You open up the door, you tell them about sex and get them started on it, and they'll take care of the rest. And before you know it, you have a fresh wave of new customers. Now, Planned Parenthood was founded by Margaret Sanger, just a horrible monster of a person. She was a complete racist who went to KKK rallies, and she called blacks reckless breeders and human weeds. That was her thought of the blacks. She believed in eugenics, the same as Hitler, the same as Nietzsche, that better DNA would result in better evolution. This all is thanks to Darwin, in his evolution theory, that these people think this way. But they're going to improve humanity by getting rid of inferior DNA. And Margaret Sanger saw the blacks as inferior, and to get rid of them, does this sound like Hitler at all? They're both reading out of the same book. Nietzsche, the philosopher, dreamt of a Superman where you had the best DNA on the planet breeding and improving the bloodlines until we evolved to the next level. And Margaret Sanger was no different from Hitler in this dream. And her step wasn't getting rid of the Jews, it was getting rid of the blacks. So she established Planned Parenthood abortion clinics in poor neighborhoods targeting black people. And none of this, of course, is going to be discussed in polite circles, but it needs to be known. The origins were extremely racist and cruel. Today, they're targeting not just blacks, but low-income people in general. They set up their clinics in lower-income areas, and they're targeting children. There is no shame in this organization whatsoever. They know very well that if you can get sex ed into earlier grades in school, they begin to become sexually promiscuous much sooner. So now we have sex ed being taught in kindergarten. How is that necessary? How is that even conscionable? But nonetheless, it is happening. It's there. And young girls are being sexualized at a very early age through some very depraved training in these quote unquote sex ed classes, where they have racists. You have a couple of male statues with an engorged member jutting out in front of them, and okay, ready, set, go, girls. They have to race to the statue and place a condom on the erect unit, and the one who does it fastest wins. but it's got nothing to do with speed whatsoever. It's all about sexualizing these young girls, corrupting their lives, and making them ultimately new customers at the local Planned Parenthood. Now, this is a business. Its business is bloodshed. It is one of the high places in our society where innocent blood is being shed on the altar. As you know, Israel was led into pagan worship by offering their infants into the molten arms of Molech, where their bodies would be destroyed in those glowing red hot arms of this idol. In the same way, innocent blood is being shed on the altar, whether the high priest wears robes or a surgical smock doesn't matter. The titles they have don't matter. It's all about the blood sacrifice. And the same God is drinking the blood in both cases, and in terms of the Mayan sacrifices and all the rest. All that innocent bloodshed is to the same God. It really is. But um, you know, one of the most despicable things, Planned Parenthood was exposed recently for harvesting the body parts left over from the abortions rather than incinerating them, as most of the victims or patients, however you look at it, received an abortion. They would take and harvest the baby's body parts and sell them on the black market to research companies and various other industries. And there was an expose. A very brave young couple went in with video cameras, got all of the dirt, uncovered this abominable practice. They should have been welcomed as heroes for what they had done in exposing this abomination. Instead, they were criminally charged. They appeared in court. Planned Parenthood is suing them for all kinds of damages, and Planned Parenthood came out as the victim, and this brave young couple came out as perpetrators of criminal activity. Very backwards, very twisted outcome, and a sign of the times we're living in. Absolutely. Where good is called evil and evil is called good, just as the Bible said it would be. Well, I read this article and I said, that's it. I'm going to start praying against Planned Parenthood. And there was a response to my comment, and it said, oh, thank goodness you're just going to pray about it and not actually do something. And that the very next day after praying, a Planned Parenthood clinic was shut down for some sort of violation of codes in Kentucky. And I posted that news article just to share that, you know, maybe prayer isn't as powerless as you think it is, but I've continued to pray. And 2 days ago, I saw a news article that Planned Parenthood is about to lose $60 million of government funding. And I am rejoicing, but at the same time, I'm so deeply humbled that God would hear the prayers of a simple blue collar truck driver who is no person of notoriety, no person of any worthiness whatsoever. Why would God honor the prayers of a dead dog like me? What verse am I thinking of there? Oh, Mephibosheth, when King David um, looks around for any offspring of Jonathan, that he may honor his covenant that he made with Jonathan. And Mephibosheth is the son of Jonathan. And as David has taken the throne that rightfully should have been Mephibosheth's in the line of succession, but because of the deaths of Saul and his son Jonathan, the people raised King David up as king. And they're so certain because at this time in the Middle East, it would have been normal for King David to destroy the descendants of Jonathan and Saul so that no claim to the throne could be made by anyone. And King David sends for Mephibosheth, and Mephibosheth is brought before him. And the only thing Mephibosheth could be thinking is, great, now he's going to kill me. And instead, King David says, you're going to eat at my table. All the property your father owned is yours. All the servants, all the cattle, all that was your father's, I'm restoring to you. And more than that, you will live like one of my princes. You will eat at my table. This is not at all normal or expected or any. It's so bizarre. But this is God showing us that we receive such a blessing and covenant with Jesus Christ. We're welcomed into the kingdom. We're restored. We're given all of this property, all of these possessions, when all we really had a right to expect was death. That's all we could properly expect. And yet we're being treated in such a bizarre way. Why are you giving me all this? Mephibosheth said, why are you doing all this for a dead dog like me? And everyone who comes to Christ has that same moment. Why? Why are you doing this? I know what I deserve. I know that I have nothing good to look forward to. And yet our King is bestowing all of this on us because of a covenant. And it's just wonderful. But I just wanted to share that to encourage your faith. So what if you're one person praying alone in your car on the way to work? It doesn't matter. The way we value each other is nothing like how God values us. And God chose to answer the prayers of a blue-collar truck driver. And I want God to be given the rightful glory. I don't know why he does what he does. His ways are not our ways, but he did answer my prayers, and I'm so humbled and thankful that he cares enough to hear me. It just blows my mind. Who am I that you should hear me, Lord? And I want you to be encouraged. There is so much power in prayer. Could I have gone out and schemed a way of defunding Planned Parenthood? Absolutely not. It, and what influence do I have as a Christian white male? I am a social pariah. Nobody even wants to hear my thoughts. So it has to be the power of God. But God heard my prayers, and I want to glorify him and thank him for that. So tonight we are in Revelation chapter 6. We're reading verses 3 and 4. This is the second seal that is about to be opened. Remember, only the Lamb was worthy to take the book and to open its seals. So, beginning in verse 3, when he broke the second seal, I heard the second living creature saying, "Come." And another red horse went out, and to him who sat on it, it was granted to take peace from the earth, and that men would slay one another, and a great sword was given to him. Now, we have always had war. War is something that is not new at all to humanity. Cain slew his own brother within, you know, just a few years. It's so sad how quickly humans took to killing and bloodshed. And in the last 5,500 years of recorded history, we've had 40 years where there isn't a war recorded. Now, that doesn't mean there weren't wars in those 40 years. They simply weren't recorded. War is common to man. So what exactly is this saying, since war is a continuing theme in humanity? It's going to be something a whole lot more messy than our just average continuation of this war and that war and the other war. And I went back through history, kind of combing through it to see, maybe trends can tell us something about that. And I found a good graph that kind of summarizes, and this is found in Our World in Data, global deaths in conflicts since the year 1400 by Max Roser. And it's a great compilation of all the various wars beginning in 1400 and leading up until the year 2000. And I'll break it down in 50-year increments. So in the 1400s, there's roughly, I'm just going to go kind of a general summary so it can make sense. Roughly 10, 12 wars, and the most bloody mentioned is the period of the 100 Years' War. And then in the 1450s, fairly similar, 12, 15 wars. The most bloody is the War of the Roses. In the 1500s, there is a slight increase in activity, maybe a little over 20, and the Peasants' War in Saxony was the most bloody. And none of these wars that I'm seeing are overly horrific. They're all pretty typical in terms of total bloodshed. In 1550, it remains consistent with 1500. No real wars of any renown, but 25 or so wars, and certainly nothing that really leaps out. In 1600, the most renowned war is the Dutch War of Independence, also the 80 Years' War. And there's actually a bit of a tapering off in the total number of wars, maybe back down to 20, maybe even less than that. In 1650, there is a spike in bloodshed because of the Anglo-Dutch War and another war which isn't labeled, but the overall number of wars has tapered off to maybe 15. In 1700, there's less overall wars, probably less than 10, and yet the War of Spanish Succession and several other wars, there was quite a large amount of bloodshed. And going into 1750, even less wars, 6 or so, with the 7 Years' War, the War of Austrian Succession, certainly some bloodshed, but the total number of wars, not so much. But then things begin to change in 1800. With the Napoleonic Wars, the War of the French Revolution, a number of other large, very bloody wars, and the total number of wars jumping up to roughly 25. 1800 was certainly bloody in comparison to the history. In 1850, this trend continues with the Taiping Rebellion, the Lopez War, the American Civil War, the Crimean War, and a total number of more than 40. It certainly is an uptick in violence and total bloodshed. 1900 sees this climbing terribly with the First World War and the American Genocide and several other large wars, and again 40 or so other wars, a very, very bloody period of time. 1950 continues to accelerate with the Second World War, the genocide of the Jews, the War of the Spanish Revolution, the Vietnam War, and a huge number of other very violent conflicts made 1950 unlike any of the periods of time mentioned prior to it. Horrifically bloody. And then in 2000, it tapers right down to a very calm period. And this is really almost like the calm before the storm. It's increasing and increasing and increasing with the number of people on the earth, the amount of tension, the competition for resources and space, as we can expect. With a tremendous increase in population comes more conflict, more bloodshed, when all of a sudden in 2000, we see a radical tapering off of war. It's very strange. The Afghan civil war and the genocide in Rwanda are mentioned in the 1990s, but very little activity comparatively. So we find ourselves in a bit of a lull right before what I believe that we've got the silence in heaven for half an hour, and I'm saying that metaphorically, And then this red horse is going to ride out. And if you've been following the news at all, we see the rumblings, big players all over the planet rumbling. If Iran goes crazy, if North Korea does the unthinkable, if India and Pakistan throw off restraint, if China goes, rather than on an economic front, decides to fight on a military front, Russia is really ramping up global tensions with a lot of really antagonistic behavior. You know what? Every country is creeping towards the brink. And when the conflict opens up, it's already kind of clearly drawn out that we're going to have Russia, China, Iran, North Korea in cahoots. The US and England, of course, standing together, but we're not even clear where the rest of the EU is going to line up. I think they'll favor whichever side looks stronger. India and Pakistan, unclear. Japan, we would like to think would side with the US, but we don't know. It's just very, very tense right now. Tensions all around the globe, and this is what Jesus said: wars and rumors of wars are abounding right now. So when it all is released, it's going to be insane violence. So that is the second seal, that war, and it says here in verse 4, it was granted to take peace from the earth, and that men would slay one another. So while we've always had wars, we've also always had peace in other places. And it sounds to me like this might be the removal of peace, a war on a magnitude that nobody can stay out of, nobody can hide from. So, I'm not ending it on a very positive note, but you know, I don't know when the Lord takes us out, but we have to be prepared to stand firm even if there's violence raging all around us. God bless you, and thanks for joining me.